The Sacramento Kings have decided to open up on a potential trade of De'Aaron Fox ahead of the February 6th NBA trade deadline.
Things started.
De'Aaron Fox has been traded to the San Antonio Spurs, where he will now join forces with Victor Wembanyama in a blockbuster deal that had been widely speculated before the trade deadline. This move signals a major shift in strategy for both the Kings and the Spurs, with Sacramento parting ways with their franchise point guard and San Antonio securing a dynamic backcourt presence to pair with their generational big man. The trade sees the Kings receive Zach LaVine, Sidi Sissoko, 3 first-round picks and 3 second-round picks in return, while the Chicago Bulls, who were also involved in the deal, acquire Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and their own 2025 first-round pick back from San Antonio. For the Spurs, this trade is an absolute win, marking a significant step forward in their rebuilding process. De'Aaron Fox is widely regarded as one of the top 25-30 players in the league, and his ability to push the tempo, create offense, and excel in pick-and-roll situations makes him an ideal fit alongside Wembanyama. More importantly, San Antonio managed to acquire Fox without sacrificing their most promising young assets. Players like Stephon Castle, Devin Vassell, and Jeremy Sochan remain on the roster, ensuring that the Spurs can continue to develop their young core while simultaneously competing at a higher level. Fox had made it clear to Sacramento that he was not planning to sign an extension in 2026, effectively pushing the Kings to move him, and his preference for San Antonio as a destination only made this trade more likely. The move also solidifies San Antonio's status as an attractive destination for NBA stars. In recent years, the franchise had struggled to attract marquee free agents, but with Wembanyama's emergence and now Fox's arrival, the Spurs are quickly becoming a team that players want to be a part of. This trade gives them a legitimate 1-2 punch that could be one of the most formidable duos in the league over the next decade. Even after making the move, the Spurs still hold significant future draft assets, meaning they have the flexibility to continue adding talent, whether through additional trades or future drafts. For Sacramento, however, the trade raises more questions than answers. Instead of using Fox's value to initiate a full rebuild, they chose to replace him with Zach LaVine, a talented but injury-prone guard with a hefty contract. While LaVine has been on Sacramento's radar for years, dating back to when they tried to sign him as a restricted free agent, the fit alongside Domantas Sabonis and Keegan Murray is questionable at best. The Kings did receive 3 first-round picks in the deal, but one of them is heavily protected and unlikely to convey, meaning the actual return is somewhat underwhelming. Rather than positioning themselves for future success, Sacramento now finds itself in a strange middle ground, good enough to compete for a playoff spot, but not talented enough to be a true contender. This trade essentially turns the Kings into a version of the Chicago Bulls from the past few seasons, a team with good players but no clear pathway to championship contention. While LaVine is undoubtedly a talented scorer, his fit within Sacramento's system remains unclear, and his injury history raises concerns about his long-term viability as a franchise centerpiece. The Kings now have a roster that includes LaVine, Sabonis, Murray, Keon Ellis, and other solid pieces, but without a true floor general to replace Fox, it's uncertain how the team will function offensively. The trade also signals that Sacramento is not interested in a full teardown, despite the fact that moving Fox could have provided them with a clean slate to build around their younger players. Instead, they seem committed to staying competitive, even if it means being stuck in the middle of the Western Conference standings. Meanwhile, Chicago's involvement in the trade, while not as flashy, is a smart long-term move. By reacquiring their own 2025 first-round pick, the Bulls regain control over their draft future, allowing them to fully commit to a rebuild if they choose. Losing LaVine was inevitable, given his declining trade value and the lack of interest from teams willing to take on his contract. One way or another, in return, Chicago receives solid rotation players in Zach Collins, Trey Jones, and Kevin Huerter, none of whom are game changers, but all of whom could be valuable pieces for a retooling Bulls team. Additionally, these players could serve as trade assets down the line, further improving Chicago's ability to reshape its roster. Ultimately, the biggest takeaway from this trade is the clear victory for the Spurs. They successfully land an elite point guard who complements their young superstar while keeping their core intact. This move positions them as a legitimate rising force in the Western Conference and gives them the flexibility to continue building around their young core. Sacramento's decision-making remains questionable as they once again seem caught between competing and rebuilding without fully committing to either. Their return for Fox feels underwhelming, and while LaVine is a talented player, his presence does not necessarily elevate the Kings into true contention. Chicago, while not a massive winner, makes a pragmatic move that gives them the ability to control their future. By regaining their first-round pick and adding solid depth pieces, they position themselves for a more structured rebuild rather than being stuck in the limbo they've been in for the past few seasons. Looking ahead, all eyes will be on how Fox and Wembanyama develop together, as the Spurs now have one of the most exciting young duos in the league. If their chemistry develops as expected, this trade could be the move that propels San Antonio back into title contention in the coming years. Meanwhile, the Kings will have to prove that their decision to acquire LaVine was the right one, as their future direction remains unclear. For Chicago, the focus will be on maximizing their newfound flexibility and deciding whether to fully commit to a rebuild or attempt another retool. For now, though, the biggest winner in this trade is San Antonio, as they position themselves as a franchise on the rise, ready to make noise in the Western Conference for years to come.